Hey everybody, welcome back.
Hey, hey, hey.
We are on episode 5. We made it. Hope everybody is having a good week so far. And we wanted to introduce a topic to you that we feel like has not been socially widespread very much. And we want to bring it to fruition.
Yes.
Sophia, why don't you introduce the topic?
Yeah, so we want to talk about green flags. It's something that people really look at red flags in relationships and situations in their lives, and that's something that's focused on. And so we want to bring up the topic of green flags and kind of work on a mindset shift there. So uh, I was. I'd never heard the term green flags before you brought it up to me, Lauren. So this is definitely something that's not widely talked about, clearly, because I'd never heard of it before you brought it up. So I'm really excited to talk about this. And where did you even get that idea, Laura? Like, is this something you talked about in therapy, or did you see it somewhere, or?
I think I got it off of social media, to be 100% honest with you. I think I just came across a post one day about it. I follow like a lot of self-help um and like psych and what have you type of Instagram accounts, and I think I just saw it one day and I was like, "Oh, that's interesting. Like that's a mindset shift, that's a
Yeah.
different way to look at a relationship rather than the way that I was taught growing up." So,
What were you taught?
I think I was more so just taught what to look out for in a relationship, like, um, the red flags. Look for, if somebody's financially unstable or treats you in this specific way or does this or that. I was more so looking out for what not to date
Mm-hmm.
or be with in another person, whether that's a friend, a significant other, etc. I was just basically shown the red flags rather than what to look for, the positive things to look for in a relationship. And I think it's really important that we do that, and that's what green flags are
Yeah.
in essence.
I'm just thinking about what you're saying, and were you actually taught that? Like, did your parents say, or did your mom say, hey, I
I don't
here
know
are
that it was
things?
like a sit down conversation where my mom said or a family member said, "Hey, don't be in someone's life who treats you like this." Like, I don't think it was ever that. I just can specifically remember hearing more in just different
More
situations, like in
don'ts
random
than do's.
situations where don't,
Yeah.
yeah, don'ts and do's. And it wasn't as much of, find somebody who embodies this. It was, don't do this.
Yeah. No, I think that's exactly the same for me. Because when you said the way that you were taught, I was like, oh, did you actually have a conversation with someone
No,
about
yeah,
it? But
no.
no, for me, it's the same. I would look at relationships and people as I was growing up and see what I didn't want. That's exactly what I was doing.
Yeah. I can relate to that pretty deeply. I mean, my parents got divorced when I was very young, and even though didn't fully understand the reasoning behind their divorce until I was much older, I definitely learned from a young age, that there are things that you need to have conversations about before you, commit to anything with another person. And, being able to see that through these two people who were supposed to raise me together,
Mm-hmm.
definitely gave me a mind shift for sure.
Yeah. For looking at the don'ts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I would say I looked more at the don'ts than I look at the do's. Or at least when I was younger, that was more so what was shown in front of my eyes. So it's what I saw.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, me too. I know my parents are probably going to be listening to this, so I don't want to say too much on it. But they have some rocky points. I've seen that
Yeah.
throughout my life, and I want to
Right.
make sure that when I my thought process my whole life has kind of been, I want to make sure that I'm with someone that I 80 years after being with them, I'm still going strong and happy, and that we're communicating effectively. But that was coming from a place of, I don't want it to look like arguing, or I don't want it to look like
Right.
defensiveness, or I don't want it to look like putting guards up and not wanting to have conversations about things.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, instead of those don'ts, the
Yeah.
do's.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, I just want to say that the entirety of the conversation that we are having today is all about a positive mindset shift
Mm-hmm.
and looking at the positives in our lives and not the negatives, and this like applies to all people. So yes, let's go to the do's. What are green flags, and what are some of the green flags that in general that we should be looking for? So I think we've kind of explained what green flags are. They're just the positive things that you want out of a relationship, out of a positive, co-working team relationship, whether that's friendships with parents, or with a significant
Or
other. It really works
coworkers.
across the
Yeah.
coworkers. Yeah, exactly. Like, relationships are endless in today's world. We have relationships with so many different people, but this goes across the board for everybody. With that being said, I'm gonna kind of start to dive into some of the actual green flags that you can look for, and it's a rather long list that we have. So I will just start off, and Sophia and I will probably go back and forth with a couple of them.
Yeah.
So I think the first one would be self responsibility, and while it is a broad term, I think as mature people, as mature adults, we need to have self responsibility within our lives, financially, emotionally, physically. And it's really important, because if you embody all those things, but whoever you are having a relationship with, whatever that relationship may look like, it's really hard to have a relationship with somebody who doesn't know how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're either A, walking them through those steps of how to do that themselves, or B, you are just having constant conflict because you aren't understanding why this person isn't able to do this thing. So it's so important that both people are able to do that.
Yeah. And I want to point out, too, just a little bit, backing up, that this is not an exhaustive list of green flags either. This is just, we're
No.
just giving you some general ideas to start with that positive mindset shift, and just ways to start thinking in green flags. These are green flags
Yes.
that we thought of because they're things that are valuable to us, but there is definitely green flags that are not on here. So whatever is important to you, look for those green flags too. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Next one, I would say, unless Sophia, you wanted to say one, because I did just say one.
No, you're good. You can do the next one.
Okay. um, I think self-reflection is another huge one.
Yeah, huge. 100%.
And this is something that I actually had to learn the hard way in a long-term relationship, where this person just, not that they were incapable of doing it, I just don't think that they ever had done it before. So when I came into their life, it was a very big game changer when I expected them to be doing it because I was doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't know how, they didn't really know what it was. Like, they just kind of lived their life and they moved forward with every day, which is great, but they never took time to look back on things until I actually brought things to light and asked them to reflect and look back on it.
Yeah.
So I think that, you know, being able to self-reflect, and self-reflection brings about change. Self-reflection brings about, like, what could I have done better, or what can I do better in the future to be a better person in a relationship, a better anything, really. And it's a learning opportunity, and that's kind of the whole goal of life, is to learn. I mean, that's what you're doing from the day that you're born until the day that you die, is learning. In whatever different capacity that is. So being able to self-reflect, especially in a relationship and when you are being a team with another person, it's huge. And it's definitely a green flag that I feel like I look for if I'm seeking out a romantic relationship.
Yeah, and not even romantic relationships for me. Self-reflection is a huge one. It may not be as big for someone listening to this, but for me and you it is. I think for maybe people with anxiety even, it may be important, because people with anxiety are constantly self-reflecting, and it causes harm sometimes, but you kind of want to be with someone who understands that a little bit, and that goes for friends too. But for me, self-reflection is so important for a similar reason too, as I've been in relationships in the past where that's been difficult, and for the other person. And something that I work on really hard in therapy is being the most effective version of myself. Because like you said, that's what the point of life is to grow every day, because that's really all you can do, and that's all you have control over. So for someone to be in my life, I need them to have that ability to look into themselves and want to be a more effective version of themselves, because I want like-minded people in my life. I mean, I don't want to surround myself with people who only think like me. Absolutely not. But that is such an important piece to having conversations and to not communication, but I mean to communication, but conflict resolution. That's the word I was looking for. Because if you can't look at what you've done and look at your actions and look into yourself and see how that matters in the world, then that's a problem for me.
I agree.
Yeah. So the next one we've got on here is self-sufficiency. This one is a little controversial for me, actually, because I think there are some people that I know that are really kind of obsessed with self-sufficiency. They're like, I need this to be a happy person. If I'm not super successful, then I won't be. And that's a little bit scary for me, even with a green flag. Or I don't know if I would. It's a little bit scary, but it is also important. I don't want to have people in my life that have absolutely no direction or no goals either. So there's kind of a balancing act with that one. What do you feel about that?
That's interesting that you say that, because I didn't really view self-sufficiency in that way when I wrote it down, or even when I think about self-sufficiency within a relationship. When I think of self-sufficiency, I think of, you know, financially, emotionally, kind of everything with self-responsibility or being self-responsible. You can also be self-sufficient. Can you cook yourself a healthy meal?
Yeah.
Are you able to, you know, just maintain yourself as a human being without anybody else feeding into that? Like, if you were, you know, left stranded, would you be able to take care of yourself? Or do other people have to kind of chime in and help you out? Which, getting help, there's nothing wrong with that, and I want to make that very clear. But there comes a point, I mean, Sophia and I are both in our mid-20s. There comes a point where you do need to be self-sufficient. And, you know, luckily enough, I haven't really run into this problem too much. I maybe have in one aspect or another, but I haven't that much. But I know that I have friends who this is a huge problem for. Like, they cannot, you know, they just say they can't live. Like, they always have to have either their parents or somebody else, like, constantly helping them out. And I think that you reach a point where you do need to be self-sufficient and not constantly relying on other people, and realize that you cannot live constantly through other people for your entire life.
Okay.
I know that may be a bit harsh, but like that's kind of where I was coming from.
No, I don't think that's harsh at all. I completely agree with all that. Yeah, when I saw that, my first thought was the success aspect of self-sufficiency. But I totally see what you're saying with the more fine details of
Right. And I like another example, which I have not gotten to this point in a relationship yet, but one way that I look at self-sufficiency is down the road, I would like to have a partner who is fully able to, run a household with me, take care of kids with me, be able to do everything that I'm able to do. And if I need to like go on a trip, or I need to attend to an emergency, or I need to do whatever, I'm taking a girls' weekend, a girls' vacation, If I do something, like I can leave my partner and they're able to be fully self-sufficient and they don't need me. Like I have heard so many horror stories of, not to single genders out, but moms who feel like they can't leave their kids with their father or with their, significant other, their wife. We're not discriminatory. So if your wife or husband or however you identify in your personal relationship, they're not able to do that. They do not feel comfortable doing that because they do not feel like their partner is able to be self-sufficient. And that terrifies me. Like, I do not want to be one of those people who is complaining. I choose to be with males. So in my case, it terrifies me if I ever had a husband and I would be getting calls every hour about, like, how do I do this? Because I left them home alone with the kids. So, like, self-sufficiency for me goes a little bit deeper in the fact of, like, I need them to be able to function at the same level I am.
Yeah, I completely agree. And so, bear with me here. I'm going to take a step back for a second.
Okay.
I'm processing everything that we're talking about, and I'm noticing that even in this green flags episode, we are talking about don'ts. Like, we are trained.
We are.
Our brains are wired and trained to think about don'ts. Like, we're saying, I'm terrified for this to happen, and I'm just mind blown here. I'm having an epiphany, kind of like, wow. Even with the goal in mind to talk about green flags, we're still thinking about some red ones.
We are, but I think, no, that is 100% valid. But I do want to point out the fact of, when I go into a relationship, this is romantically speaking, because this is kind of where I'm at in my life when I'm looking at for green flags, because I already have most of my friends, like, most of the other, like, relationships in my life are positive, and my current relationship, romantic relationship, is great, but it's one of the things that I looked for when I started dating, again.
Is self-sufficiency, or the three being
being self-sufficient. And it wasn't, I didn't go into it being with, like, oh my gosh, like, can they not do this? Can they not do that? Like, I would just notice little things and be like, oh, that's awesome. They're able to do this. Mm-hmm. Like, and, I would just pick up on the little things that they could do, or I did notice, or they were doing, and they were fully capable of doing. And so to me, when I saw it, I viewed it as green flags. I wasn't looking for those red flags. I was to an extent, but, I more so looked for them to show me the green flags physically.
Yeah. I think I did too for my most recent relationship, but I can see myself saying, like, looking into my memory right now, that when I met my ex-boyfriend before the one that I'm currently dating, I remember thinking right at the beginning of that relationship, oh, he does this thing, and I'm happy about that because I haven't had that before. And it was through a lens of, I don't want it to look like it did before, and it doesn't, so these are good things. So I'm not entirely sure if that was a green flag outlook or not. I feel like it was kind of a mix, but...
I mean, I guess that's the way that I viewed it, so I view it as a green flag, but just because there are green flags in a relationship does not mean that it is always going to work out either.
Yeah. No, that's not even what I was saying, but I'm thinking, like, I was really happy that he did certain things that I had never experienced in other relationships. And then when I met my current boyfriend, it was kind of the same thing where I was looking at things that I was missing in previous relationships that were present in the current relationship that I'm in. And I was really, really excited about those things. And
I would say I did the same thing for the relationship I'm currently in. So I can relate.
Is that green flags though? Like looking at stuff, hey, I'm missing this stuff. And then now it's positive.
From my understanding of green flags, yes.
Okay. So instead of I didn't have these things, so if I see these things, then bye. Because that would be a red flag mindset, right? If I see those things that I didn't like in the new person, then I'm going to say bye.
Yes.
If it's like I was missing these things,
right,
and I see these things, so that's more of a green flag mindset instead.
Yeah, I would agree with that, yes.
Yeah, I'm just like, we're learning at the same time here.
So I'm going to move on to a new one because I feel like we have covered this one pretty in depth. But I would say the next big one, at least for me, because this is something that I went through having had that issue and now I no longer do, is being able to not place blame and admit mistakes.
Yes.
This is gigantic, and I came from a previous relationship where this was a really large problem. And I can remember in this relationship, in my past one, realizing it and consciously knowing that it was a problem and consciously addressing the problem with the person, but they physically could not see what I was pointing out to them. And I don't want to go too in depth with it, but it was basically, they would say, you do this all the time, or you always do this thing. And it was never, hey, can we have a conversation about this? I've noticed this has happened a couple of times, and I just want to have a conversation with you about it to see, like, how we can work together to fix this or combat it or whatever. It was always just, you do this, I don't like it, and that was the end of the story. And I said, first of all, I do not appreciate just being blamed right off the bat. Like, I think that we need to have a conversation about this. But second of all, that was a huge generalization. And generalizing is another issue in and of itself.
Yes.
But, like, being able to not immediately place blame when something goes not how you may have wanted it to, or it goes wrong, and I'm doing quotation marks because not everything is wrong, but, it may not have gone how you wanted it to, and admits to their personal mistake, and then uses I statements.
Yes.
This is just huge. And, in my current relationship, I have that. And that was one of the things where, I noticed it. It was one of those things where we haven't really fought over anything big. Like, we haven't really had any very big issues. But when we have had something come up, it's immediately, can we talk about this? I realize that I may not have handled this very well. And then I say, what, thank you for bringing this up. I realize I probably didn't handle this well either. How can we move forward and how can we learn from this experience?
Yeah.
And that is promoting, team work, that's promoting a healthy bond, that's promoting not blaming each other at all, admitting to mistakes, and just flat out communication, positive communication. So instead of looking for that red flag of, do they, just place blame, do they do this, do they do that, I just took note of when they did this positive green flag thing, like when we were having communication, I was like, oh wow, they did this, that's awesome. Like, I kind of, like you were saying before, I haven't had that in the past, and this is something that I was looking for and I needed out of a relationship, and so far they've been able to provide it. So
yeah, this is a huge one for me. In all of my relationships, I really have a hard time being friends or being in relationships with people who don't do this thing. So it is one of the biggest green flags that I look for in making new friends and making new connections with people is when they can admit to mistakes they've made. And because that takes maturity, and that takes self-reflection, and that takes courage to admit when you've made a mistake. And that's a very, very valuable trait for me. And as soon as I see someone do that, I'm like, I want to know that person better, because they seem like somebody I would vibe with. And yeah, that's a huge, huge green flag for me. I love people who can admit to mistakes. I admit to my mistakes all the time. I make lots of mistakes.
Yeah. Is there any of the ones on here that you want to talk about personally? Because I can just keep going if not.
So someone who is able to be on their own and be happy by themselves is a big one for me. Yeah.
Huge.
Because that's a new thing for me, is being happy by myself. It's a relatively new phenomena for me in my life. So I've noticed that as I've grown, that people who don't know how to be happier on their own, I have a hard time connecting to. So when I meet someone that really knows they've got their life set up in a way that they're putting themselves first and they're happy with themselves, that is a huge green flag for me, because I'm like, I can connect to that. That's what I want out of life. So the fact that you want that out of life too, that's a bonding source for me, and it's a really positive thing, because happiness is, what's the point without happiness,
Yeah, I kind of have a story on this topic, and that's part of the reason why I wrote it down on the list of what are some green flags. This was probably one of my top 3 items that I was looking for in a significant other when I started dating again this past year. I was in a relationship for almost 4 years, and I've gone into some depth with it in past episodes, but after 2 years of dating this person, they came home one night. We were living together at that point, and they sat me down and essentially told me that they weren't sure they were in the relationship with me because they wanted to be with me, or because they were just scared of being alone.
Ugh.
And when I got into this relationship, you have to realize I was 19 and a half. And for me, I hadn't really had a serious long-term relationship, so I didn't even think, it didn't even cross my brain to, like, look for somebody, like, look for the quality in somebody that they're able to be by themselves. And, have alone time and be happy with that. And so when I had that experience, when that came up for me in my life, it was a huge turning point, because I was just like, oh my gosh, like I never even thought to look for this. And I mean, what 19-year-old normally would?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I hadn't had an experience in my life where I was taught that I needed to look for this. So after that whole thing happened, like I made them go to therapy. You know, I moved out. Actually, I moved out for 4 months, and I just let them be alone. And it was a really hard time for me in my life. But you know, I thought that they had kind of figured out that they wanted to, you know, that they wanted to date me for me, because after the 4 months they came back to me and said, you know, this is what I want. Like, I'm not in this relationship just because I'm scared of being alone, etc. But I realized 2 years after that, that wasn't really the case. And, you know, they didn't really, truly, at least to my knowledge, spend time just sitting there alone, getting to know themselves. Or, you know, they filled up their time with school. They filled up their time with playing video games. Like, they did other things while I was not there, and they weren't truly just alone with themselves. And there is a part of a reason why we're not together anymore. And when I left that relationship, I had a conversation with them, and I said, I really hope, you know, you take time to work on yourself. And, you know, I really hope that you take time to take care of yourself. Go and get therapy, you know, work on you. Take this time, because this person was almost 4 years older than me. And I was like, I really hope that you take time to learn about you. And unfortunately, I don't think they did, because last I knew, they got into a relationship like a couple weeks after I left, which says something in and of itself. Like, after an almost 4-year-long relationship, they couldn't even be like single for more than a month before they started seeing somebody else. Yeah. But
no, it's a huge one.
I just, like, it's so big. Like, you know, you need to be self-sufficient. And I can remember talking with my current significant other, and I had a very in-depth conversation with them about this. Like, we went for a walk one day. It was probably a couple weeks after we started dating, and we had like a 30-minute conversation about this on our walk. And, you know, I told him this was one of the things that really drew me to him, because he was able to be on his own. He lived on his own for 3 years all by himself and did not date one single person and just got to learn who he was. And I thought that was awesome. Like, that, honestly, that was one of the most attractive things about him when I like first started dating him. But I just went on a tangent, so you can go ahead.
No, I think this is so important because I struggled with it. I didn't know how to be happy on my own for a very long time, and I had the same issue that you were talking about your ex having in that relationship, where I wasn't sure if I was with someone because I actually wanted to be with them, or because I was not happy being alone. And it turned out that I wasn't happy being alone. And so I think I find that quality so attractive in friends and in other people, because when I see that they're happy being alone, I know that I'm actually valuable to them, and that I'm not just like filling a space or a hole where they don't want to be alone. So that's part of the reason why it's such a big green flag for me. And then another one on here that really speaks to me is the communicates openly, because I know a lot of people that have a hard time expressing what's going on in their heads when they're feeling things. And that is challenging for me, because I constantly am expressing what's going on in my head and when I'm feeling things. And I need to have people in my life who also can do that. So when I sit down and have a conversation with a new person, I I just pick it out as soon as I see them like opening up to me about what's going on in their brains. I'm like, this is a relationship I value. This is awesome. I love this about this person, because those are things I like to talk about. Clearly, that's we're doing a podcast about things that go on in our brains. So,
yeah, I won't talk too much on this one, but I think that this specific quality or green flag has caused so much anxiety for me throughout the years because of the fact that I have been in countless relationships where I have had open communication with them, and I've been very upfront and honest with them that, you know, I need them to come to me whenever they're feeling something. And then, you know, time goes by and I'm like expecting them or trusting them to tell me when they're feeling something. But instead, I have had this issue of they feel something, they don't know how to come and talk to me about it, and then they just randomly decide that they don't want to be in the relationship anymore. And I'm like, what the effing heck? Because, like, you know, like, I was like, what happened? Like, how did you get to this point? I didn't even know there was a problem. And then they're like, well, this happened, then I started feeling this way. And I'm like, well, why didn't you come to me, and why didn't we talk about it? I don't know. I'm like, okay. And so I just constantly, like, have this fear now that whatever relationship I get in going forward, these thoughts and these feelings are going to manifest, and they're going to snowball just like they have in past relationships. And it's left a very large trust issue for me.
But so that's where we're doing this green flags episode, for exactly that purpose, right. Is a positive mindset shift, because
yeah,
everybody is not the same. Everybody is different. And so people are not always going to be bad at communicating. There are some people that are really good at it. And so that's why when you look for a green flag for somebody who's good at communicating when they feel something, or willing to communicate at least when they're feeling things, that's huge. And it should hopefully, if you're really doing this positive mindset shift, limit that trust issue whole, because you're like, oh, this exists, and that's what I need to focus on. They have given me evidence that they communicate, and so I'm going to use that evidence because it's positive. Yeah, that's my 2 cents on that. I think that kind of brings us into the how looking for green flags can positively influence your mental health. Do you kind of want to talk about that?
Yeah, I agree. I think we should move on to that portion as well. So in general, mindset shifts are going, if you're actively working on something and trying to create a mindset shift, yes, I said that correctly, they're generally going to be positive if you're conscious of them and you are trying to work on them. So, like, how can looking for green flags positively influence your mental health? It's already positive because you're already doing something to change consciously your mental health. And, like, I don't really know how much more to explain that, but I feel like it's pretty self-explanatory. And it's going back to our last episode. It's with the neuroplasticity. Yeah. It's rewiring your brain at the biological level to look for things in a positive light. And yeah, that's all this really is. Like, it doesn't really get much more complex than that. Do you agree? Or
yeah,
what are your
I do have a little bit of feedback on that. So one of the things that I worked really hard on in therapy or that I was educated on by my therapist, is that the lens you wear matters so much to your mental health. So, and that applies to looking at other people and looking at yourself. So when I first came to my therapist, I was wearing, and she made this analogy of like wearing glasses. I was wearing these glasses that everything I saw was negative. I was only seeing the negative evidence in situations, in people, and I was processing that negative evidence and applying that to my thoughts, and it would just continue with more negative thoughts in my head because I was looking for negative evidence. And as I was doing some research for this episode on some green flags, one of the things I saw is that when you look for the don'ts in people, you're looking for the don'ts. Like you're the only thing you're seeing are the negative things, and so you're going to ultimately end up with people who embody those negative things because that's what you're looking for. You're looking for the don'ts. Right. And so it's the same with green flags. If you can figure out how to look for the positive evidence, then you're probably going to end up with people who have those traits that you're looking for because you're wearing a lens with positive evidence like coming into it. So it does wonders for your mental health, not just because of the positive mindset shift, that's a huge thing, but also because then the people that you're now bringing into your life have those positive traits that you're looking for because that's what you're focused on. Your focus is on the positive evidence. So it changes the pathways and helps you see more positive things in general, and then it also puts people in your life who are more positive, which just reinforces that positivity. So that's my...
You said that better than I did, and I agree with you. Yeah, I know I'm happy you did that. Like, I am so happy you just said that the way that you did because I feel the same way. I just didn't think to verbalize it that way, so thank you.
Yeah, I didn't even realize when you brought this episode idea up that was connected. Like, that the lens that you wear thing. And it really, when she made that analogy, my therapist, about the glasses and the lens that you're wearing, it kind of hit me hard because I had never thought of it that way. I really was looking for negative things. Like, I saw things happen in situations and I was like, and I would take that negatively and bring that into myself. And
right. Yeah. It kind of makes me feel like the saying, this is such a an old saying. I wish you could see my face as I was saying that. Yeah. But, there are those people that we say are wearing rose-colored glasses.
Oh.
And they see the positivity in, everything. So when you were talking to me and explaining the lens analogy that your therapist used, it kind of reminded me of that saying, some people just wear rose-colored glasses. They see the positivity and they see the greatness in everything. And, there isn't really a saying, at least that I've ever heard of, for somebody who, I guess, kind of has the opposite outlook.
Yeah. Well, because that's not...
So...
It doesn't usually bring joy, so...
Right, exactly. And I think that another point that I wanted to make with this episode is that, you can't constantly wear rose-colored glasses. It's just, I think that there are circumstances where you might get yourself into trouble if you constantly do that. And I do think that, being positive and having a positive outlook and doing all those things are very healthy and will ultimately get you to a mental point of happiness, because happiness is not a destination. Happiness is your view. Happiness is, your thoughts. It's
a mindset.
Just you in general. Yeah, exactly. But I think that there's a balance, just like there is with everything else in life. And we've preached this since day one with our podcast. There's a balance. And I think that while being able to view the green flags is huge, and being able to integrate those rose-colored glasses into relationships, especially with noticing traits about others, is huge. I also think that there needs to be balance with noticing when something isn't okay, and noticing something isn't right, and, those red flags, and being able to recognize them and taking them for what they are and not just ignoring them.
Yeah, no, we're not saying it all in this episode. to ignore red flags.
Yeah, exactly. So finding that balance is really key. And I feel like when I, started dating again, that was something that I had to really reevaluate, and something that I had to really take a step back and look at how I dated, how I looked at others, how I approach relationships in general. When I was going through my intensive therapy after I got out of my last relationship. So I hope that message comes across.
Yeah, the balance is key. Yeah, we definitely don't want to be saying ignore red flags at all. It's just don't only focus on red flags, focus more heavily on the green ones.
Yes.
And with that, I want to talk about some of the green flags in our current relationships with people.
Yeah. Let's go for it.
So I listed some people when we were doing the prep for this that I've really noticed green flags in. And you're one of them, Lauren.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. One of the things that I really value about you is how understanding you are about my mental health. So that's a different sort of green flag, but for me, that's a big one, because when someone tells me, and it's kind of almost boundaries, but when someone tells me that they can't do this thing, or they don't want to do something, or they're not ready to do something, I know that that's because it's their mental health, and you know that. And I value that so much when I tell you, for today, for example, I had a really busy weekend. I was completely a zombie and I napped for 3 hours. And I was like, I literally can't function. And you were just so understanding about that. And you're like, your balance is important, and just let me know whenever you're ready and we'll figure it out from there. And that's so huge for me. And I really appreciate that about you.
Yeah, I mean, I thank you. I appreciate that compliment. But at the same time, I think it's important to, if you push somebody in a way that ultimately makes them feel uncomfortable, like, you're never going to get anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I think learning how to work with somebody, obviously, again, there are boundaries even within that. Like, you can't just let somebody, like, overrun your life. Like, you have to have boundaries. But compromising and being able to work together as a team is really
Yeah. Yeah, so there's kind of a lot to that understanding, but like you said, there's boundaries in there, there's compromise in there, and not taking things personally. I know there are some times when, if someone says something this was something I dealt with a lot in the past, was people would tell me things and I would take it personally. Like, I would think they just didn't like me, or they were mad at me. And I really value that when you feel that way, you ask me about it. Like the other day, you're like, I'm not sure if you're mad at me about this, and I just want to double check that you're not. And I would so much rather someone communicate that to me, and then we can address it right then and there, than be constantly worrying about it and worrying that there's some kind of frustration going on when there's not, Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. And I think that's important. And that kind of goes back to, again, my whole issue that I've had in the past with others is not communicating up front. So I try and be that change, and I try and, not be a hypocrite and communicate up front how I'm feeling.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I was so drawn to you when we rekindled our friendship, because I was like, wow, I'm on this process of growth, and I'm on this journey of self-discovery, and you are too, and you're constantly working on yourself. So I think that's a green flag for me, as someone who constantly wants to be a better version of themselves tomorrow than they were yesterday.
Yeah, I agree.
What's something in your life that
So I think that honestly, right now, I know I keep going back to it, but my romantic relationship. Like, I've kind of already said a couple of things when we were talking about what are green flags and, you know, what are some different types of green flags. But really, for me, I haven't had to build up any new relationships in my life over the last, gosh, year and a half, at least since COVID started.
Yeah, really hard to do that when there's a pandemic.
But yeah, and like really the first and the only person that I've had to do it that with is my my new relationship that I've had. I don't know, it's not like new, but it's newer. And that for me has been a place where I have really been able to skyrocket my adventure of finding green flags. So just to kind of go back on it, and I guess actually, you know what, I changed my mind. I'm like changing my mind as I'm saying this, but I'm gonna say some new ones. They this person, like, they want to be a team with me.
Yeah.
And, like, they want to equally share with me. And, you know, they truly care about me. And I have been going through, as of recently, probably the past couple of weeks with I can't talk right now. The past couple of weeks, which I have shared with you, Sophia, I have been really struggling with my anxiety again. And specifically in relation to my relationship. And if you want to know more, go listen to our last episode because I talk all about it there, of why, you know, what I'm struggling with. But they have really, like, done a fantastic job. Like, I truly could not feel any more grateful and blessed to be in this relationship right now because I have told them what I'm struggling with and with my anxiety, and they have constantly just reassured me. You know, they have, like, done nothing but try and help me, even though that they have not personally really ever dealt with mental health before. They have done nothing but try and learn and try and help me through it. And I appreciate that more than words can describe. Because in previous relationships, specifically my last one, you know, part of the reason why the relationship ended was because I was going through a depressive phase, and that combined with my anxiety, like, they basically told me that I was just bringing them down on a daily basis, and they didn't even want to come home to me anymore because they just, like, knew the moment that they walked in the door that they would start feeling how I felt. And there's many things that I dissect from that issue alone, but it just, like, it made me feel so unsupported, and it made me feel so alone in what I was feeling. And, you know, this new person in my life is able to not only take responsibility for their own emotion, and if I'm, like, somehow causing something, like, they're able to take a step back and tell me, and then we reassess together how we can both respect one another. But also just the pure simple fact that they try and understand things that they have never had to experience. And that takes a lot.
Yeah.
Like, that truly takes so much to be like, hey, I haven't really dealt with this, but I want to support you. It's like, it's kind of like me with you and your eating disorder. Like, I've never personally experienced it, but I would do anything that I can to, you know, help you or support you in any way that I could. And I feel like that should just be an automatic green flag. That should just be, like, an automatic in any relationship, but it's not. And I can tell you it's not because I personally experienced when it has not been the case.
Yeah.
So
what I'm taking out of
that for me has been huge.
Is, and, like, I'm looking at that situation and green flags for me, and something that is a green flag for me is when someone asks questions to understand. So,
yes.
Like, I always thought that I wanted people in my life that already understood that do deal with depression and anxiety and eating disorder issues, because it's easier to build relationships with people who understand. But a green flag in a person they don't have to already understand, but if they ask me questions and genuinely want to know about me and about the things that I think about and the things that I feel, that's a huge green flag. So I think...
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, I mean, even my significant other currently, like, he has flat out stated the fact to me that, you know, he does not struggle with mental health. Like, he, a little bit over, you know, when COVID started, and kind of, I feel like a lot of people, though, were struggled with mental health for maybe the first time in their life during that, which was completely understandable. New world for all of us. But, you know, he has listened to every single episode of this podcast that we have created on the day that it comes out. And he's like, you know, like, I don't really get it. I don't really understand it because I've never really dealt with it, but I want to support you. And if that is doing this, then I will do it. And that just means the world to me. And, you know, like,
I don't know. I want to play devil's advocate here a little bit, because I think that a lot more people struggle with mental health than know that they do. Because mental health, it's just like interwoven in our everyday lives, and people who have actual depression and actual anxiety definitely know what it's like to struggle with mental health, because they struggle with it on such a high, intense level compared to everyone else. But I think that everyone really could benefit from learning about mental health, even if they don't think or know that they struggle with it. So.
Yeah, and I think that, I don't really have much else to say
it's just
that,
like stress management.
I agree with you.
Sometimes, like, some of it is stress management. So
definitely.
Yeah.
But I think that's really the only person I have in my life. Do you have anybody else in your life that you want to talk about? I know I personally see a couple of people here, but I don't know if you want to go into it any further.
No, I have quite a few people that have a million green flags, and I don't necessarily need to talk about all of them because we're kind of getting to the end of our hour here.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, so like one of the people I put on there, I don't want to mention names too much. I mentioned yours because you're literally on the podcast with me, but
right.
One of the people on there, I put her on there because she always asks me questions. Actually, two of them, and so that really ties into that green flag that we just talked about. They're constantly wanting to ask me questions and understand about my life, and they care, and they show me that they care by asking questions, and yeah. So I kind of want to end it off on some funny things that when we were prepping for this episode, I looked at BuzzFeed green flags. Yeah. And some of them are funny, some of them are just real, and I'm just going to read a couple that I thought were cool.
I think they're awesome, but continue.
Yeah, so one of them that I didn't think of before I read the BuzzFeed that I read was whenever someone compliments others behind their back, that's a green flag. And I was...
It is.
Like, mind blown by reading that, because I'm like, wow, I've never thought of that, but if somebody is complimenting someone else when they're not in the room, like, wow, that's somebody I want to be I want them in my life. That's so cool that they're thinking about the positive things about somebody who's not in the room rather than the negative, because so many people just talk negatively behind other people's backs, and that's really valuable. When someone puts their shopping cart in the collector instead of letting it roam free across the parking lot, when I see someone putting it away, I value that person. I do that. I thought that was funny.
Me too. Yeah. They're caring.
Yeah, they care. It shows that they care about the people around them and the environment around them, and the people who are working at the store. Then this one I thought was cool because I do it, and I've usually seen it as people think it's weird, but when someone is friendly whenever they see their exes, that's a big green flag. I'm friendly with all of my exes, and people think that usually that's really strange. So when I read that when they're friendly whenever they see their exes is a green flag, I'm like, okay, that's kind of cool.
Yeah. I also think, though, too, like, yes, I agree with you. I think that, being cordial and being kind in person, if you're able to have that type of relationship, but also if you came from a very toxic relationship, it is okay
To not
to
be. Yeah.
A, not have a relationship with that person, and B, to I don't think it's ever okay to be,
Uncivil.
like straight up just uncivil, bashing them, but walk away, or like, be courteous but do not interact, like, if it was very toxic.
Yeah, even if it was a little toxic, it's an absolutely okay thing to not be friendly with your exes, but to have the maturity to not talk badly about that person constantly to other people. That is really, I think, a green flag. Especially in marriages, when people are talking about the other parent in front of their kid in a negative way.
Yeah. In front of kids, huge. Yes, definitely.
And then the last one I want to end it off on is just a funny one. When people use that weird flashy light on your car before you merge into another lane or make a turn, I just thought that was hilarious and I wanted to share it. So
I saw a meme about that, I think, a couple of days before we went to write out the outline for this episode, and I was like, how, like, funny that I just saw that and we're now putting it into this episode. But yeah, it promotes communication. Like, you're actively communicating in a public setting with people that you don't know, and use your turn signal.
Yeah. Like, you care about the people around you enough to
the safety and yes,
feature. Yeah.
I think that's a huge green flag. Well, I think we covered a lot. There's definitely a lot more. So one thing that I wanted to say in the ending of this episode, Sophia, if you are okay with it, we are starting to get our website put together. And we are going to have a lot of information on the website. Bear with us as we get it up and going, and we'll probably be making some changes to it here and there. But at least I plan on making, like, some sort of, document or something that people can go and look back on if you ever want to read through anything that we said and just do a quick glance back at what we said. So eventually I hope to have, like, some of these green flags up on our website, but once we have it up, we will post it. We're gonna have, like, a little link in the description of the description of our episode, so be on the lookout for that. It'll come in a couple of weeks.
No, that's great. I like that. Okay, well, that ties it up, I think, so
yeah, I think that's it. And if you guys want any more in the meantime, or want to talk about it, or if you have any of your own, please feel free to share them with us. We have our Facebook page and our Instagram, where you can go and either message us, or on Facebook you can even comment on our actual page of some things that you have found green lights in. So yeah, well, we hope you all have a great rest of your week, and we will talk to you again in our next episode, which will be in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Alrighty. Happy hump day.
Bye. Yeah, happy hump day. Bye.